Hi folks, it's Mike Murphy, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set up SSH keys on your Hostinger VPS so you can securely and remotely access your VPS without using any passwords. In the first part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create SSH keys on your computer. I am on a Mac, so I will be using Mac OS Terminal. The process is similar if you are on Windows or Linux. After creating a pair of SSH keys on your local computer, in the second part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to add the public SSH key to your Hostinger VPS dashboard. I will also show you how to make sure that port 22 is open on your Hostinger firewall so you can access your VPS using SSH. And in the final part 3 of the tutorial, I am going to show you how to remotely connect to your Hostinger VPS using the SSH keys that you create in this tutorial. Part 1. What are SSH keys and how do you create them? SSH keys are a pair of cryptographic keys. You always have a public and a private key, and they are used to access systems like your Hostinger VPS without using a password. Whenever you create a new SSH key, you always get two files. One file contains the public key. We're going to put the public key on Hostinger. The second file contains the private key, and we're going to put the private key on Termius, or whatever SSH client you want to use to access your Hostinger VPS remotely. You can think of your public SSH key like you're putting a padlock on your VPS. It is called a public key because it is okay, or it is safe for you to share your public SSH key. Nobody can open your public key or the padlock on your VPS unless they also have access to the second key, which is the private key, and you never, ever share your private SSH key. There are two types of SSH keys. This is just the cryptographic method that they use. So if you're using a tool, you might have to choose between which one that you want. Well, Hostinger recommends the ED25519. That is what we're going to be creating in this tutorial. Now, there are several ways and tools that you can use to create SSH keys. For this tutorial, I'm just going to be showing you how to do it the more traditional or the common way, and that is using the terminal or the command line. Now, I am on a Mac, so I will be showing you using the Mac OS Terminal, but it's similar if you're on Windows. There are very easy ways to do it using password managers like 1Password, and you can even do it in your SSH client like Termius. But if you're like me and you're going deep down the AI rabbit hole, and maybe you're trying to build your developer skills, well, doing so using the terminal or the command line is really great practice. Here is how to create an SSH key using the Mac OS Terminal. And this is going to create two files, the public key and the private key. All we're going to do is copy this little snippet of code that is saying generate an SSH key, use that strong ED25519 cryptography method, and you're going to enter in your actual email address here. You're going to paste it in the terminal and just tap the return or the enter key 3 times. You'll find that same snippet of code if you sign into your Hostinger dashboard, click on Settings, go to SSH Key, click plus Add SSH Key, and there on the right side, you're going to find instructions for generating an SSH key for both Mac OS and Windows. There is that snippet of code. You can just click this little icon to copy it to your clipboard, and when you paste it into terminal or the command line interface, you'll just want to replace this with your actual email address. I'm going to open terminal by using Spotlight. I'll press the command key, tap the spacebar. I'm just going to start typing out terminal. I'll tap the return key. I'm just going to click, so my cursor's at the beginning of the command line. I'm going to paste in that little snippet, so Command V. I'm going to tap the right arrow key to put my cursor at the end. I'll tap the left arrow key just to go one in, so my cursor is over the double quotations. I want to keep that though. I'm just going to tap the delete key to replace that placeholder email. I'm just going to type in my email address. Now I'm going to tap the return key. Terminal is confirming that we are generating both a public and a private, so a key pair using the ED25519, which is exactly what we want. I'm just going to keep it in the default location, so I'm going to tap the return key. You can enter a passphrase, which is going to lock down the files, but I'm just going to keep it blank. So I'll tap the return key. I'll tap the return key one more time. So the third of the 3 series that we talked about. Once the keys have been generated, you will then get this key fingerprint, which is just a long string with your email address at the end, and then this key random art. So this ASCII art image, so me showing these on screen is not a security risk. The fingerprint and the art are unique and they identify your keys. After creating the SSH keys in Terminal, the next thing we're going to do is copy the public key and we're going to add it to our Hostinger VPS dashboard. I'm going to clear the terminal window to give us some room, so I'm just going to type in the word clear and tap return. Now I will show you both methods to copy the public key. We'll start by doing it the easy way by just copying this little snippet. To go into Terminal, I'll paste Command V. I'll tap the right arrow key to go to the end. And if you are new or you're learning Terminal, pbcopy is a pretty handy command to know. That just means copy to the pasteboard or copy to the clipboard. So it's saying, look for this file name, copy the contents of it to the pasteboard or the clipboard so I can then paste it somewhere else. When you tap return now, it looks like nothing happened. But this file was copied to the pasteboard or the clipboard, so now when you press Command V, that is your public key. Pretty cool. And when your cursor is just sort of hanging where you don't see the command line to enter in a new prompt, you just press the Control key and tap C, and that'll get you back to the command line. And to open the folder where the SSH keys were created, we're just going to type in open, space, I used the tilde key, / period, SSH. When I tap return, the Finder window should open and I should be inside of the directory of SSH. And there we can see the ID ED25519. This is the private key, which I'm not going to show you and I'm not going to share. And this is the public key. It ends in the .pub. I'm going to select the public key. I'll right click, open with, just choose any text editor. I'm using Z text editor. I'll click that. That is my public key. I'm going to select it, copy it to my clipboard, Command C. You have the public key copied to your clipboard. It's time to go on to part 2. So sign into your Hostinger VPS dashboard. Go to the overview page. Scroll down the overview page where it says SSH key. So currently I have 0 SSH keys, but I'm about to change that. So I'll click the arrow. I'll click plus add SSH key. We've already generated the SSH key. So we're going to the left side where we're going to add the SSH key. I'm going to click. Now I am a 1Password user, so it is prompting me, hey, do you want to create your SSH key in 1Password? Well, I did it the old-fashioned way and did it in Terminal, so I'm good. Now I'm just going to paste Command V. I'm going to give my SSH key a name. I'm going to call it Mike-MacBook. I created the SSH key on my MacBook. Click Save. It is now adding the SSH key or putting a padlock on my VPS. And now when I go back to the overview page, you can see if we go down to the SSH key, I now have 1 SSH key added to my VPS. Nice. To remotely connect to your VPS using SSH, you must have port 22 open on your VPS firewall. To check and see that port 22 is open, go to Security, click on Firewall. So if you've already created your firewall and you just want to double check to make sure that port 22 is open, come over here and click on the ellipsis, so 3 little dots, choose Edit, scroll down to the rules. If you watched my tutorial on how to set up your firewall on your VPS, you would know that the first rule that you should create is port 22. And if you haven't watched my tutorial, link in the description, that'll show you how to set up your firewall. Accept is the same thing as allow or open. So this is telling me that port 22 is open. I am good to go. If for some reason you forgot to add port 22, come up here to add a firewall rule, make sure it's set to accept, protocol TCP, type in 22, anywhere, and click add rule. If you haven't created a firewall on your VPS, the good news is there's nothing that you need to do because port 22 is already open. The bad news is So is every single other port on your VPS. And that's a total of 65,535 ports wide open. So I definitely recommend you watch the tutorial and you set up a firewall as soon as possible. Now it's time for part 3, where we're going to remotely connect to our Hostinger VPS using SSH. So your Hostinger VPS, or your virtual private server, you want to be able to connect to it remotely over the internet so you can make changes, updates, transfer files, whatever you want to do on your server. You want to be able to do so remotely over the internet, but you want that connection to be secure and encrypted. Well, fortunately, there is an internet protocol called SSH, which stands for Secure Shell Protocol. SSH uses something called cryptography, so the connection between the user and their remote servers, like a Hostinger VPS, is an encrypted, secure connection. An SSH client is like a telephone. It is just a tool that you use to connect remotely to a server. But once the connection is made between the SSH client and the remote server, the connection itself is encrypted and secure because of the SSH protocol. The SSH client that I use to call into my Hostinger VPS is called Termius, but you can use any SSH client that you want. In order for the SSH client to be able to call or reach the Hostinger VPS, well, it needs to know the phone number to call. In most cases, you're just going to use the IP address of your Hostinger VPS, which you see whenever you sign into your Hostinger dashboard. SSH keys and passwords are just different types of credentials, but they both serve the same purpose, and that is to unlock the door so you can get access inside of your VPS. Every time you want your SSH client like Termius to connect you remotely to the Hostinger VPS, you just need to tell it which set of credentials you want it to use to give you access to the VPS. When you tell Termius that you want to connect to your Hostinger VPS remotely using the traditional method of username and password, your username and password credentials are being sent through a secure network, but it is still over the internet, so it runs the risk of a hacker in the middle being able to intercept your credentials. And as long as the hacker knows the IP address of your VPS, it is going to be able to access your VPS when it has your username and password. When you tell Termius that you want to use your SSH keys as the credentials to connect to the VPS, the private key is never sent over the internet. The private key is stored locally on your computer. So because it's not sent over the internet, a hacker can't intercept anything because there's nothing to intercept. Termius calls up the VPS and says, I want to access the server. I know that you have the public key. I have the other half of the key, which is the private key. So the VPS says, prove it. The VPS sends this little piece of data. It's like a challenge. When Termius gets this piece of data, it signs it using the private key that only it has. It sends it back to Termius, and Termius says, it's a perfect match. Now I'm going to open up the door. This is Termius, the SSH client that I use to connect to my Hostinger VPS remotely. So here Termius is saying, create a host. This is like creating a contact on your phone. So I'm going to enter the IP address for my Hostinger VPS. That's like the phone number for Termius to be able to reach the VPS. To find the IP address for your VPS, you're going to sign into your Hostinger dashboard, go to Overview, and then go down to where it says Root Access. And there you're going to see your username and your IP address. And you are going to need both of these in order to connect in Termius. Now for this tutorial, we're going to use the SSH key like a password. So we are not going to need your root password. But if you ever do need your root password, this is your username, and this is where you can set the root password for your VPS. But now, just remember your username, which is probably root, and then you're just going to copy your IP address to your clipboard and go back to Termius or whatever SSH client you are going to use. Back in Termius, You're going to add your VPS IP address, and then you're going to click continue. That is going to save the connection details like in your phone book so you can reuse it for any time you want to connect to the VPS. Once you click continue and save your IP address, this big sidebar over on the right is going to pop up. And if for some reason you accidentally close it, you can always bring it back by just selecting the little shortcut that was created. You can right-click and choose Edit Host Details, or just tap the letter E. And I can click Show More to expand that panel. And now we're just going to fill in the host details that Termius needs to connect to VPS. So at the top is the address, or the phone number. So you are going to be seeing your VPS IP address here. I am just hiding it for the sake of this tutorial. Under General, I'll click and label. You can label this whatever you want. This is for your internal organization. But now I know when I open Termius and I click on this shortcut that Termius is going to connect to my VPS and use my SSH key as the credentials. The port was automatically set to port 22, which is exactly what you need for SSH. Now I'm going to go to credentials. You do have to enter the username, which for me is root. It's probably that for you as well. The password field is where you would put your VPS root password if you were creating a little shortcut for the credentials that uses your username and password. But since we're using the SSH key, we can leave the password field blank. But we are going to go right below it, click the plus sign where it says Key Certificate. We'll click that and choose Key. In the key field, you're going to enter the name for your key. I'm going to use the exact same name that I used when I pasted in the key in Hostinger. So I'm going to call it Mike-MacBook-Key. I'm going to click this Create Key. Oops, I spelled it wrong. K-E-Y. I'll click Create Key. You can change the name or the label of the key that you just added right here in this field. And now you have three options. You can paste in the key if you have it copied to your clipboard. You can import the private key file that's in the .ssh file on your local machine, or you can actually generate the key right here in Termius. And if you get to this point, you're like, wait a minute, we went through all of that and we could have done it right here in Termius. Yes, it's super easy to do in Termius. It's also really easy to do in 1Password. But now that you did it in Terminal, you are much better for it. Your developer skills are going to thank you later. I am going to choose the middle option, Import. I'm going to go back into Terminal. I'm going to say open space tilde /.ssh. That is telling Terminal to open the folder called .ssh. When I tap return, Finder is going to open and I will be in the SSH folder or the SSH directory. Here are the two SSH keys that I created, and I know the public key is the one that ends in .pub, so this is the private key. All I'm going to do is simply drag this onto Termius into that little field. I'm dragging and dropping the private key that is going to import it into Termius. I'm going to go in the top right corner and click on Save. So in the host details, at the top in the address field should be your VPS IP address. The port should be set to 22. In the credentials, you should have a username. Root is my username. No password is required. And your private key should be imported and saved in Termius. You are now ready to connect to the VPS. Just click the connect button at the bottom. You're going to see this little progress bar, and when you see green, congratulations, you just connected to your Hostinger VPS remotely over SSH. So the connection is secure and encrypted. And in case you're wondering, when you connect to your VPS remotely using an SSH client, this is the terminal of your VPS. It is the same terminal when you sign into your Hostinger VPS and you go in the top right corner and click on Terminal. So you might be wondering, why the heck would I use an SSH client when I can just go into a web browser and use the terminal for my Hostinger dashboard? Now, aside from the fact that Termius just has a nice design aesthetic and there's a bunch of different themes so you can really customize the look to how you want it, it's clean, it's minimal, it feels light. You never worry about it crashing out or timing out like what happens in Chrome or other browsers all the time. And you want to see something else cool about using Termius or an SSH client to connect to your VPS remotely? If I go to SFTP, I can actually see all of the folders and the files on my VPS. Try to do that in the Hostinger dashboard in the browser. And that is how you generate SSH keys locally on your computer. You then copy the public key and you paste in the public key on your Hostinger VPS. You then use an SSH client like Termius, where you add the private key. You add your IP as the address or the phone number that Termius calls to connect to the VPS. You make sure that you're on port 22. For the credentials, you only have to use your username, which is root in many cases. No password is required when you are using SSH keys. Just make sure that you've added the private key, and when you're all ready, you click connect. And you are now going to be able to connect to your Hostinger VPS remotely over a secure and encrypted SSH connection. Congratulations, you did it. My name is Mike Murphy, your AI handyman. Cheers.